Jesus Christ!
Yep, right there's my favorite enemy of the entire game. Of all the horror games I've ever played, none compare to the experience that takes place within Resident Evil 2. The new one, that is. I've always been a big fan of horror games and other horror media, mostly outside of the horror movies unless they were old slasher films like Halloween. I don't find those movies all too scary anymore, but slashers, namely Michael Myers, have always left an impression on me. I love the towering force of nature that is very one-track minded, a goal in which they will never stop at anything to achieve. And in RE2, we find this kind of archetype. This character ensures that there's rarely a dull moment where we're completely bored and suffering the monotony of just solving puzzles. They come around to throw a wrench into our plans and stay as a constant threat. These characters, in most games, are usually known as stalker enemies, usually a behemoth of some sort that'll never completely leave, something that you just can't kill, more or less something stronger than the player themselves. It is with this archetype that RE2 uses a zombie apocalypse scenario and flips it completely on its head. And it is here where we meet the tall, wide-frame brute who is sporting some quite interesting retro fashion. And a name of simplicity as well, Mr. X. A barbarian of colossal size and silent temper, he's a force to be reckoned with. A sort of unstoppable force without an immovable object. So without further delay, let's delve into why Mr. X works, and how he is a great example for future stalker enemies. Now I should state I'll be specifically talking about the RCPD segment of RE2. I wish to cover how he works as a stalker, and his greatest moments shine through within the RCPD. So any places he appears outside the sewers or labs will not be covered. Just to let you folks know. Anyway, without further delay, let's move on. From our early moments in the RCPD, we encounter our most common issue, the zombies. Leon is forced to deal with them no matter where he is within the RCPD, and we as the player begin to understand how we should mold our playstyle around them. If we can avoid them, it is preferable to do so. The conservation of ammunition for places we can't run around our issue is paramount so we may survive the other predicaments of the game. If you can deal with wasting time just to conserve some ammunition, then it is a good chance that that route is more ergonomic. After we figure out how to avoid unneeded encounters, the game allows us some time to work out the issues in our plans and study the map to a point where we know where we're headed constantly. It is after this grace period that we are kindly introduced to our dashingly horrifying stalker. Remember everything you just learned? Yes? Good. No? Well, now's the time to cram. For if you don't straighten up, you'll be limping out of the RCPD. If you'll be walking at all. Because what you just ran into is the test to your study material. Mr. X is what can only be described as a moving wall. When he is let loose into the RCPD, he forces us as the player to immediately change route, run into him in a hallway, turn around as fast as possible and sprint for a safe room. Or you could outrun him. He is slow enough to be outran, but there are a few long hallways where he will speed up, and I must state how panic-inducing those footsteps are when they suddenly get faster. Speaking of which, we cannot move forward without talking about the footsteps of Mr. X. This is your only indicator of how close he is, although it is certainly not a pinpoint system. I had many moments where I was listening for him and I couldn't figure out whether or not he was in the same room as me. But it is nerve-wracking when you hear his footsteps and you suddenly realize that he's just on the floor above you. The sense of weight that only his footsteps give off is ludicrous. He is easily known in this game as a force of nature where you can't just duck into any room and hope he'll forget about you. He gladly drives a wedge into all your plans, forcing you to run through rooms that might not even been cleared yet. And this is all to get you to waste ammunition on poorly placed shots to at least make one zombie stagger out of your way. This drives you far away from your objective, and when you're in a safe room, you'll hear his footsteps move away, and the game resets. You're back to trying to finish your objective, and Mr. X is now somewhere that you don't even know. This is why he works. This oppressive reminder that the zombies are less direct of a threat than he. No matter where you are, he can easily flip your plans around just by his presence. And he doesn't stick around so long that you can't achieve your goals. Although oppressive, he isn't overbearing. Keeps moving, doesn't dawdle about, allowing this constant cycle of gameplay to keep going. His purpose is to force quick thinking, make the player decide how they wish to lose him. Do you try and run for a safe room? It's an easy way to lose him, but it wastes time, and you'll have to wait for him to pass by. Or do you reroute and run the gauntlet? He'll be there for some time, and there's a chance that even when you lose him, he'll still move in the same direction that you were headed, possibly placing you in even worse of a position than before. Also, make sure he doesn't catch you. I know this is a no-brainer, but he will floor you in one hit and kill you in the second. So if you're low on health, make sure that you can certainly get away, because he will end your run if you're not. Now, making these decisions and testing your skills as a player are what he does best. This ensures that you always have a plan of escape at a moment's notice. This is also why I believe Mr. X is one of the best representations of how Stalker enemies should function. A constant threat that isn't omniscient and doesn't always know where you are, but he isn't a pushover. He is a serious danger that humbles you to slow down and not alert him to your presence. Now, for a change of pace, let's preface this. I haven't played the Resident Evil 3 remake, but I heard that Nemesis, the stalker of the game, was butchered. Apparently, in the original, he is what I would say was even more overbearing than Mr. X. This is most likely because of his ability to cover large gaps by running, and he fits the situation much better than Mr. X could have. If we place Nemesis in Mr. X's spot in Resident Evil 2, it would be far harder and much more unfair. Vice versa would have you running circles around Mr. X, but Mr. X can't be killed, and Nemesis can be. And this is one of the litany of issues that Resident Evil 3, the remake at least, suffered from. But killing him now is just a grenade throw away, and I feel that right there is where the Stalker enemy is no longer an imposing threat that it should be. The problem isn't the fact that he can be killed, quotation marks for Resident Evil 3, but rather the fact that they can fall so easily. Mr. X has several scenes where he's shown to be an absolute menace, even just punching zombies out of the way just to get to you and crushing the skull of some poor private investigator. If you blew 4 shotgun shells into his chest and he fell over, gave you some loot, and then came back a bit later, you might as well waste the ammo if you don't wish to go around him. If anything, the Stalker becomes a powerful zombie. And that's not what they're supposed to be. As stated before, a Stalker is a constant threat that is stronger than the player. Nemesis never broke this rule in Resident Evil 3, the original one. If you wanted to fight him, you could, but the battle was certainly slighted in favor of Nemesis. This is mainly because what you would get from fighting him was very rare loot, and he would come back later. But that cycle of gameplay was misconstrued in the Resident Evil 3 remake. And this is why I say Mr. X is such a good example of a Stalker, or at the very least, a good presentation of one. He isn't the shining statue that every other Stalker should be, rather he's a model on which others can and should base their Stalker characters off of. He is oppressive, a serious threat, and an unwavering enemy. Although he is tailored to the RCPD, he fits the bill as for what many other Stalkers need to do as well. Being slower is important, because if he was too fast and could catch the player with ease, seeing them on the hallway would probably end your run right then and there. If they could kill you instantly, then again, the game would become unbalanced, because there are way too many places to get cornered in within the RCPD. And not being overly omniscient, if they were, then the player would be forced to do puzzles with them right over their shoulder. No matter where you are, a Stalker is supposed to be in the back of your mind. So keep quiet, lie low, and be ready for their ire, for if you're not prepared, they'll show you the consequences of your flagrant disregard of their presence. Alright, there you have it, folks. Why Mr. X is one of the best Stalkers ever, and why he is such a good example of one. Now, I must state, he is far from perfect, and there are several moments when I encountered him, and it felt a little too easy to escape. Not to mention that there were several moments that he actually helped me, killing a zombie in a hallway where I was waiting in a different room for him to pass. Plus, his chase music needs some more presence. It does cut in and out pretty quickly after you leave his line of sight. but he is usually still on your tail at that time, so it ends just cutting back and forth abruptly and then ending, and then maybe starting up again, possibly. But besides those side notes, Mr. X has been one of the most fair enemies I've ever had to fight, and I hope you all enjoyed these ramblings on why he works so well. Thank you for sticking around until the end, and expect some more videos coming in the next few weeks. Thank you, and have a lovely day.